In terms of getting involved in this social enterprise, I think the expectation was that it would be quicker and faster to build and gain momentum, I think. I mean, we did start during COVID, so that's kind of hard to say how that might have been different. Because the business was my feeling going into it, because it was already established, even though it wasn't registered, it had been a local business here for a number of years. So for me, there was already product market fit. There was already like consumer validation. We already knew that products were good. And my business partner, Monica, had already done a lot of work to build good systems, even though they weren't always followed. So I felt like it would actually be pretty easy to grow, sell, scale, get investment, all of those things. And that hasn't been the case. It's actually been quite hard. I don't think it's because it's a social business, although I think that's part of it. The social aspect is challenging because instead of just profits as a metric, we have impact we have to be mindful of. So that means making sure people are paid fairly and making sure that they're taken care of well. And it also means the products and processes that we use have to follow our ethical code, and so it doesn't always mean the cheapest materials, or it makes sure that we're choosing ethical providers, which means the price tag is higher. So in order to produce products that fit with our social mission, it costs more than it might if we were just trying to sell stuff. So that's a challenge for capital. So cash flow is always a constant, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I wasn't, because I'd never worked in products before, my business was always services. So, that was definitely a learning curve, where the expectation where it would be quite simple was, it just wasn't. And it's still not. It's very challenging, using capital, having capital, finding capital. Even we did the G Challenge last year, right? And we were finalists, which was great. But the challenge, trying to go global versus, that was another challenge too, man. So many, locally, we have a good value proposition because we're the only toy company, really, that's even remotely in this space. But globally, we're not. And so it's not enough to have a social story and expect that it's going to do well. And because it does well in Cambodia, doesn't mean it's going to do well everywhere else. And so, yeah, I think I was very humbled by just how much work it's taken to even get it to where it is now. So we're working on that, is how to become investment ready. Right? And I think one of the challenges around this is not so much the tasks that are required, it's the time. It's the time and the human resources, because neither Monica and I really get paid to do this, so we have to divide our time between consulting work that actually pays us and then time investment into the company, right? So right now we're working on, initially we were looking at BBM Longo and the capital, how do we get financing for that for global scale. But right now we're looking at capital for Cambodia Knits here in Cambodia. So that's kind of different, because now it's more directly supporting the women. It's more directly about supporting jobs. And so now we're re-looking at how do we position ourselves well for investment now. One of the things that we learned last year, having done the G Challenge, and then we did talk to a few investors last year, was that the most interesting thing potentially about investing in Cambodia Knits is the business model. It's not the products, it's the business model. So what's interesting about the business model for Cambodia Knits is, as far as we know, it's the only company in Cambodia that is currently has a formal structure for fairly paid, flexible, home-based workers. Right? There's a lot of people in Cambodia that do artisan work or work from home, but it's all very informal. Our workers all have health benefits, they have pension, and they have income. And it's, as far as we know, like I said, the only model that's registered and that provides home-based workers with those types of contracts. So That's a model that we think is replicable across different product lines and not just the types of products we've been doing. So it's been a bit of a learning curve around how do you approach investments. Depends on who your investors are. Investors we were approaching for BB and Bongo and global sales, very different than what we're approaching and what we're trying to do in Cambodia. So, but capital is still the issue because we do products, so we require raw materials before we sell. Right? We require a fairly big chunk of capital expenditure before we're actually seeing the returns on it. So now we're just in the middle of building a pitch that will hopefully attract the right kind of impact investor or angel investment.